The Detective Is Already Dead is a mess. Now, I didn't expect much from it going in, especially since most reviews of it aren't favorable. But even with those low expectations, man, it was pretty awful. I'm thoroughly surprised it is getting a second season and other things that are rated highly and more people enjoy don't. Maybe in the future. Maybe. Now, The Detective Is Already Dead has an interesting first episode, but even it is far from good. It follows Kimihiko Kimizuka, a man who is a self-proclaimed trouble magnet, always finding himself in the middle of various crimes. He's not the one committing the crimes, he's just in the vicinity when they occur. As a matter of fact, you find him in this exact same type of predicament, smuggling an unknown package onto a plane, which subsequently gets hijacked in the first episode. The person hijacking the plane isn't an ordinary human. He's an artificial human with special powers given to him by a criminal organization named SPES. He possesses both heightened hearing and can literally use his ear as a weapon, slicing through anything. Luckily for Kimihiko, the package he was smuggling contained a gun, which was for his seat buddy, a famous female detective named Siesta. The best part of the anime comes from the subsequent fight between Super Detective and Superhuman. The fight overall was cool, but even up until that high point, the anime was mediocre at best. From that fight onwards, it just goes downhill. Siesta asks Kimihiko to become her full-time sidekick, which she reluctantly agrees to after her constant prodding and promising to protect him. We were told that for the next 3 years they solve case after case, struggling to survive and getting closer together in the process. They pursue SPES, this criminal organization with some type of ties to Siesta, trying to take them out. After the first episode, we were told the detective Siesta is already dead. Fast forward to the current day where Kimihiko is a shell of himself and is now attending high school. He's never moved on, still saddened by Siesta's death. He's still living in the past and up until the last couple of episodes, still considers himself as a sidekick and not a detective. That is until he runs into Nagisa, a fellow classmate. He learns that Nagisa had a heart transplant and the heart's previous owner was Siesta. Through countless more flashbacks, the story comes together, but as a jumbled mess. We learn that Nagisa is a combination of a little girl, Alicia, Hell, who's a member of SPES, and Siesta. Nagisa is the embodiment of Alicia's life that she wanted to live. Yes, it's overcomplicated and extremely stupid. Nagisa wants to follow in Siesta's footsteps as a detective, being given a second chance at life. The end of the first season marks the first time the actual story can finally start. Siesta has created a crew that will take down SPES, consisting of Kimihiko, Nagisa, Yui, and Charlotte. I can see where the creator was going with this idea, but the execution was very poor. The duo of Kimihiko and Siesta are formidable. They balance each other out. They know exactly what each other will do without communication and trust each other completely with their lives. Siesta solves everything thanks in part to Kimihiko's help, but she's too harsh with people. Detectives base things off of logic, not emotion, so that makes sense. Now, she's still fantastic and does get the job done, but she doesn't care about other people's feelings, never considering the human aspect of cases. Siesta's apathetic nature is a flaw that keeps her from being the best possible detective she could be. Kimihiko helps in this aspect since he's much better at talking to others, but it's not enough. This is where Nagisa steps in, being handed the torch from Siesta. From the little you see of Nagisa, she's got a much greater intuition for others, adding a much different element that Siesta didn't have. One that Siesta realized was an area of improvement necessary to take down SPES. Nagisa is far more human-like than Siesta, caring about others, understanding what they are thinking, and worrying about. Combine that with the knowledge and foresight of Siesta, and you get the best detective in the world, considering every angle within a case. I also assume that she'll have the same powers that Hell possesses, meaning Nagisa is essentially a super weapon who can be judge, jury, and executioner. Nagisa, however, is one of many problems within the anime. Nagisa is supposed to be the great detective, but thus far she never showcases any detective prowess, either being carried by Siesta and her abilities when she took over Nagisa's body, or helped tremendously by Kimihiko. Just because she's an amalgamation of a bunch of characters does not mean she's immediately a great detective, just like Alicia and Hell are not. Combine this with the fact that she isn't interesting, has only been a person for a very small amount of time, and has been given very little screen time to this point. Why should we genuinely care about her? The answer is, we shouldn't. Continuing with the idea of stuff we shouldn't care about, enter SPES, a secret criminal organization. The anime does not make them seem like a credible threat, or one that you should actually care about, since you only know the basics about them. They are generic, one-dimensional, and overall pretty worthless. They add some mystery to the anime, but not enough to make them interesting. As for Nagisa, I don't understand why yet another person or persona was created for Alicia. Alicia together with Hell are this split personality alter ego combination of characters. Siesta is suppressing Hell, the evil and bad part of her. This allows Alicia to live her dream as a normal detective, but it's not even her. I can understand wanting to use this reveal as a twist, but it's just not very interesting or well put together. It's just overly complicated for no reason. A similar thing could have been done by calling her Alice in the flashback and Alicia during the present, and changing the color and length of her hair. The flashback that involves Alicia was years in the past, and her appearance could have changed drastically in that time. It's unnecessary to try to make this story more complicated than it needs to be. The dynamic between Kimihiko and Siesta is great, and there is a story that could have been good. Now yes, there are problems with the story, but the basic bare bones concept is interesting and decent if you think about it. The biggest problem lies in how the detective is already dead presents the story. It is all over the place, and its pacing is garbage. For 5 straight episodes 5 through 9, there's a flashback showing how we got to where we are in the current story. But if you also think back to the first episode, it is also a giant flashback. So 6 episodes, or the equivalent runtime of 7 episodes, since the first episode is 47 minutes long, are dedicated to flashbacks. It's poor storytelling, especially when the biggest character within the show is supposed to be Nagisa, who is used very little. In order to know about these characters, I found myself wanting to know about their past, but this neglects the present. You know, the time period in which the story actually takes place. It's extremely difficult to make the best character, Siesta, interesting or even likable, since she's technically dead before the actual story takes place. The only way to do this is by a flashback. There's so much to unpack for the story to make sense, so the flashbacks are necessary to some extent, but they were poorly done. I often found myself asking, man, how long is this flashback going to be? Now add in the fact that any mystery behind the story is taken away from you, since Siesta answers everything immediately. And most of the mystery of the detective is already dead revolves around Siesta's reincarnation as a completely different person, which is overly complicated and just stupid. By doing a flashback, you're neglecting the present now. I found myself not caring at all about characters like Yui and Nagisa, 2 characters that are important for the future of the story, but are shown very little. Nagisa is supposed to be the catalyst for the entire show, this character who's extremely important, but she's reserved for a background role. Each of the characters outside of the duo of Siesta and Kimihiko are horrible and boring. And yes, I mean the duo of Siesta and Kimihiko, not them individually. Individually, they are not anything special. How the story for the detective is already dead was told needed to be changed because it comes out as a jumbled mess with poor direction. I think part of the reason why this idea flops is because the author just wanted to keep the title The Detective is Already Dead. It's an eye-catching title that easily pulls people in, but the story was told in a way that was a prequel to the actual story that's being told, overall being a jumbled, uninteresting mess. There needed to be some type of intervention for the writing of The Detective is Already Dead. Somebody should have helped out with some of the decisions being made. There are many scenes throughout it that do not fit the narrative, as if a 7-year-old was given the green light to include whatever cool scenes they could think of, and having the reason for inclusion of such scenes be just because. The first bad thing is obviously several episodes of flashbacks with no break in between them. Then there's the concert case where Nagisa and Kimihiko protect Yui from being killed. Kimihiko doesn't know where the culprit is, calls out to that artificial human with the special ear weapon from episode 1, which he promptly answers. The very same criminal who has to be under constant surveillance and is locked away. At first I was like, okay, that's pretty awful. Then we saw the dude outside of the concert venue just chilling. They freed him for no reason, and nobody is guarding him? I almost dropped the show right at that moment, and I should have. I'm fine with the weird artificial limbs with powers, but this show has aliens and even had a weird lizard transformation and fight scene that lasted far too long. Let's also point out the fact that Kimihiko is somehow just living a normal life attending high school, even though he most likely pissed off multiple crime syndicates, including Spes, during his time spent with Siesta. You'd assume that his life from now on would be in constant peril. So having him just chilling, living life instead of being on the run for the rest of his life is asinine. But hey, this anime isn't realistic in the slightest. I can't complain too much about that. It seemed like the general thought process for this anime was to throw in as many weird sci-fi ideas as humanly possible and not bother trying to tie them together. One thing from The Detective is Already Dead I want to talk about is the fact that Siesta's blood can revoke somebody's will. At first I was like, oh cool, but that's very convenient for the story. This power better be answered at some point within the rest of the story. I assume that Siesta is from this alien race. That's the reason why she has this power, and she's just never told Kimihiko. That's literally the only viable answer, and it also makes sense why she's so good at fighting and possesses foresight of what will happen. Maybe Siesta doesn't agree with what the aliens are doing and wants to defend Earth. This is purely speculation because I haven't read the light novel, nor do I have any desire to do so. You can tell me in the comments, but leave a spoiler warning for those who are interested in the series. I am bewildered how a show as bad as The Detective Is Already Dead got a second season. But apparently people think it's good enough to actually watch. Now, will I watch the second season of it? Probably at some point, since I'm a degenerate with no life, but I am not going out of my way to watch it as it releases. I'm giving it a very short leash before I drop it, and only because there are some redeeming aspects of the show, and everything shown to this point was to build up the story. The true story begins now. I give The Detective Is Already Dead a 2 out of 10. The worst score I've given to any anime I have done a full review on to this point. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.